Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?
Well, hi there again, everybody. This is Rob Godlewski with the Think Small podcast. And today our guest is Bill Sincavage with the Sinc law firm based in Braintree, Massachusetts. Bill is the founding attorney and owner of Sinc Law. Bill, thanks so much for joining us on the Think Small podcast today.
Well, thank you for having me, Rob. I'm privileged to be part of this.
Oh, this will be a great conversation. So Bill, tell us how you got started in law, what drew you to it, and then how you became the founder of Sinc Law.
Well, I guess going back to the early days, I've always been known to be that argumentative type, and always looking for some sort of excuse or some way to do something better or do something right or think it was right, at least in my mind. And I think, even from high school to pre-college, I started doing pre-law. And then, I was always told you're going to be an attorney. And I think that was kind of my basis. And it was sort of just embedded into myself and into who I thought in my direction at some point. Although I didn't know when that point would be.
Right.
I knew it was in my lifestyle to be a lawyer or attorney at some point. And fortunately, I didn't come from a family of attorneys. So it just was one of those things for us.
So you were born to be a lawyer.
I guess I was, and
Yeah,
but
and you may not have known.
sometimes, and sometimes I believed in that, and other times I thought I would be something else. And and being in law now, I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way. But it's a journey. It's not an easy course, no matter how you look at it.
Sure.
There's a lot of great law schools out there to try to get into, and it's a really competitive market because there's, like everything, every market's saturated these days, it seems to a bit. And so there's a lot of good lawyers out there, just like every profession.
Right. So Bill, tell us about your journey to founding your own law firm. I mean, when you get out of law school, that's probably not what you did right away, but that's an interesting journey. Tell us a little bit about that.
So, for me, I'm a very loyal and I just like really appreciate being part of one thing. And I'm not one to jump ship or jump around to different jobs and whatnot. So when I got out of law school, I was looking for a great law firm to be a part of. And I was able to do an internship as part of my last semester of law school. And I was basically between Boston and Florida. And, knowing, like, loving the season change and knowing that, like, Florida probably would not be that perfect spot for me. I knew of once I came and visited Boston and I had a bunch of friends from this area in law school, I knew this was the place for me. It's a very cultural, a lot of great history here. And I figured for myself, there would just be so much more opportunity to grow and to be part of that. And so I came to Boston after law school and I did an internship with a firm and I ended up staying there for essentially 15 years of my life.
Okay.
Yeah. And I started doing international corporate before that. And I started doing litigation and I started doing estate planning. And then after some time, that firm split and I ended up staying with real estate. And I knew with that type of law, that was really what was for me. Real estate, I feel like with any other type of law, real estate was one of the better types in my mind, knowing that it made you feel good. It made people feel good, solidifying their dreams and the biggest assets of their lives with real estate and their property and their primary residence, and finally getting out of that realm of renting and paying somebody else's mortgage. It found it to be really rewarding, and I just knew that it was for me to run a really tight ship and to be the best I could for that firm. And I dedicated the 15 years of that time there. And then that day came where I think I was with my boss at the time, and we had a meeting, and we didn't exactly started to agree on things. And I think he kind of knew that I had one aspiration of kind of moving on, or at that time I really was starting to get some other job offers. And I think he just opened that door, and he's like, so if you want the door and you want to open it and you want to walk, then there it is. And he pointed at that door after 15 years and said, there's that door. And I said, all
Okay.
right, so it's time. It's not just time for me, it's time for us. And so that time came where that door opened and I gladly walked out. And to be honest with you, now over 10 years later, I don't even look back. In hindsight, I honestly wish I would have made the move sooner. But I didn't. And I stayed and I learned and I absorbed. And essentially, when I walked out that door, I got home and I told my wife at the time, and I told her that she was pregnant with our first kid. And I'm like, honey, I'm sorry, but I kind of was asked to leave. And what do you mean you don't have a job? I'm like, no, we're going to be good. And she had the confidence in me too. It was immediate to say, don't worry about it. We'll get through this. And and then even from there, I knew, and I had at the time an opportunity to take some time off in between this. And I maybe took a few weeks off, but I knew I had to hit the ground running, and it was my time to shine.
Wow. Wow. So that's a heck of a transition story. It was kind of a mutual split, but maybe not as amicable as you would have liked. But so what were the early days like in founding your own firm, right? You not only have
Right.
to build up a clientele, but you've got to get some revenue in the door.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, it was hard. It's hard for like anyone. Revenue in the door is the exact way to put it. So what I started doing is I knew to focus. I knew the internet was huge, and I knew to focus on a killer and awesome website. I started with that, and I started to share. I started with another law firm that was established, who was another guy that was my age, and I started working with him and his paralegals, and I started to share them. And after some time, sharing only went so far. Obviously, the work
Okay.
in his firm took priority, which is understandable. And I got to the point where I would just do anything I could for these other paralegals that were handling my files, and I'd be, oppositioning them with bonus or raise or incentives to please work on my files. And, you know, it got to the point where, thankfully, though, also people knew that I was starting my own business, and people came out of the woodwork and like even said to me, like, I am so pleased that you started this. Like, I would have sent you business sooner, but I didn't like who you were working with. Or, I
Oh,
love
interesting.
supporting new business. And I didn't know that opportunity would, I think that would have been a motivator even sooner. But it was my own self-doubt and whatnot that kept me there.
Sure.
And so anyways, I got the revenue basically from closing deals, and I was fee splitting with another attorney. And at that point, I started to build the kitty, and I was pretty busy. This was in early 2015, and the market was
Hmm.
so-so. It was consistent. And then even then, I realized that I can't work with somebody else, and they I almost felt like they were trying to scoop me to work for them because we had plans on office space and other things that fell through. And I went back to my Rolodex and I looked at some top paralegals that I work with, and I contacted one of my oldest paralegals from my old firm that had left many years before I left. And I reached out to her, and I guess the stars were aligned. She was just about to leave another firm, or wanted to at least. And so I started with one paralegal, and I started the process in my own closings and my own closing files. And I was doing estate planning, I was doing landlord tenant law, I was doing corporate law. I was trying to not do too many types, but all that kind of, work together with the real estate realm. And so that's where I started with the one paralegal, and I started with an admin. Then I got my attorney, another attorney, and I just went slow and steady at this. And it's just a building process. And you just got to take that first leap, and I'll be the first to admit it took me some time to make that leap. But I
Sure.
embraced change. I embraced change really well, and I knew that I just had to keep doing this, and slow and steady was going to win my race here. I started, like I said, with the one paralegal, I started in some shared office space. To the point where, I had compliance officers coming in, and banks and title companies, and they were coming in and be like, okay, so where's Sinc Law and where's all the rest of your staff? And I'm in my little office, and I'm like, you're looking at them, buddy.
Oh,
Um,
because you were
and
in a shared space environment with this other attorney, and your clients were expecting maybe something bigger.
Exactly. I mean, because I just blew up the website, and I started with that facade, and I just knew that this would be an attention getter, and they expected more, and I to myself, I wanted more. And after that, I ended up getting my own office itself.
Mhm.
And then we started with one office in one state. We started with Massachusetts, and then we naturally went from the surrounding states. We went to Rhode Island for work, and we're closing there, and New Hampshire, and to Maine. And then I eventually went back to my home state where I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I have an abstract company there too. Um, and
Okay.
it's a progression. I'm working my way south and towards the west.
Right,
But
right.
I'm not one to say I need to do 50 states or 35 states of business. For me, it's about making and forging relationships. And until I have that in place with either, what helps my business flourish, which would be, in real estate, it's a loan officer, or it's a great brokerage firm or real estate. Until I get to those points in those other spots, I'm not making the leap just to say I do another state. I want the connections, I want the business, and I want to close transactions.
So I usually like to ask my guests on this podcast about a time when, how did they navigate their business through a period of contracting revenue or depressed revenue, but literally you started from zero. So you're describing that exact period of your firm, which was the beginning. You started from nothing. So let's yeah, yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about hopefully you're in that period of expanding growth, expanding sales. You've expanded to the surrounding states now, as you mentioned. How are you navigating the growth of the firm, not only from an operation standpoint, but from a personnel and a human standpoint? Because the business leaders in this podcast know that growth brings a very specific set of unique challenges and
Oh,
problems.
it sure does. I mean,
So
yeah,
let's
I
talk
mean,
about that for a minute.
you bet. I mean, even for myself and starting with this firm or starting in law itself, I'm very much I could only do it the best way, and I think my clientele expected that. They wanted Bill Sincavage. They didn't want my associate. They didn't want to deal with an attorney. I mean, another attorney or my paralegal or whatnot. And so I was a
Yeah,
very hands-on, and it was very hard for me to expand and hire more people because I was also afraid they wouldn't do it as good as I would.
of course, that's
And
natural.
right. And so, but although I did have the mentality, and I had a great office manager who she's an office director now, say, Bill, you got to let it go. You just have to dictate. You have to understand no one's going to be exactly like Bill Sincavage. And you have to let these other people flourish at what they're good at. And even with my first attorney, I had expectations. I wanted him to be a junior, me in the
Right.
aspect of marketing and getting out there. But as time went on, he is amazing. But I also realized in his position, he was definitely more of the office type on contractual. He's super intelligent. He's very personal, but he's not me. He's not going out to get the business. He's not going to wanting to meet out new clients. And I just had to position my mentality that I gotta know what my expectations are, and then now keep hiring the right people to fill these other gaps. because I can't do it all. I could think I'm the jack of all trades, but I'm not truly.
Right.
Um, and with this growth and challenge, I just knew that, to keep hiring the right people. And I'm still a work in progress. Right when we think we hired the perfect paralegal or the perfect admin or the perfect next attorney, we find out sometimes quickly it's not the right fit, and sometimes not for us. I think people see a growing, innovative, modern, fast-paced law firm, and they're like, I could do that, and I could do this. I have always wanted to, and I believe in them too. And I think they get into this and they realize we're busy, and so our growth is a slow and steady, but yet going into these other states and working my way around. I'm also a squirrel in the aspect that I need to grab these other nuts in other markets, knowing that this time of year or in the winter or in the fall, it's a lot slower. And the only way that I'm going to keep, and the rates are high, the interest rates are still pretty high right now. So people are not in turn flourishing, but I'm in the right area. I'm in the areas that have turnaround, that have the education, that have the technology, and people still want to buy, and people are still going to sell. And expanding to these other states is basically, for my opportunities to keep capitalizing on, just grabbing every little bit of closing I could. And as people buy their investment properties or their second homes or commercial transactions, I need to diversify. And so that's where my journey keeps continuing. I know that I have to keep being better than the rest. I need to be super responsive. I need to run a tight ship and do things right always. And I will. There was never been a day that I wouldn't fall in that sort of, we ever, not to say that ever mistakes ever happen, but you have to own them, And I think that's a quality that some attorneys don't have. They just want to keep going down that avenue, like I can't do wrong, or maybe I'm always going to be right, or I don't need to fix that. But truth be told, you do need to fix it,
Right.
So
Right. So as you expand into different states, right, law is one of those unique types of businesses where the practitioners of law have to be licensed in that specific state. So you had to be very intentional about the talent you onboarded in those states. Am I correct?
yes, exactly. So the good thing about what I do in real estate with residential and commercial is not all states. So Massachusetts is very unique, unlike others where it's an attorney state, especially when it comes to real estate closing. And
What does that mean?
so, meaning that only a real estate attorney could close, only an attorney in general can close real estate transactions. So you cannot be you
Oh,
cannot be a title company, you cannot be an abstract company. You can't so as I'm expanding into some of these other states, we'll say like Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, even, they're all run by title companies and abstract companies. So those on the real estate realm of things, you don't have to be a licensed attorney. And so those
okay.
could be
Okay.
run by, they're called title agents or title producers. And
Sure.
you could essentially just get like a license, and there's an exam process behind this. So you still have to take an exam, but you could be a licensed professional. It's called a title agent or title producer. And so as I wanted to expand in the states, yes, even I as an attorney, it didn't matter. I still had to become the title agent or title
Okay.
producer. Okay. So with that, I could now, once I get that producer's license or title agency license, I can now expand into 38, 40 more states should I want. And thankfully, with starting with one state, I started with Pennsylvania as the first transition to this title company and title agency realm. You could also get reciprocity, and reciprocity works with these other states. Whereas,
Interesting.
yeah, so now I could be a title agent. I could be, and I'm a licensed attorney in Pennsylvania too. And you could start being a title agent, you get reciprocity, and you could just start growing each state. And, yes, you have to do, each state has their own set of laws and compliance, and you have to be up on continuing education and whatnot. But essentially, with reciprocity, if you follow the procedures, yeah, you could be licensed in many other states. And
Okay,
that's
so
pretty much
depending
how
on
it
the
works.
state, depending on the state, you don't necessarily have to have a licensed person in Rhode Island to do a real estate transaction in Rhode Island. You could physically reside in Massachusetts. Is that correct?
You could, and you could be a satellite or foreign officer of that state. So I could, like I do now,
Okay.
I reside here, but I do have to make sure I have closers in certain states. I either have an attorney still closing on real estate transactions because in the end, people still want to work with attorneys. They want that representation factor, but other states don't use attorneys at all. They're not even in the realm of
Right.
conversation. So the real estate agents control those transactions, and we'll essentially get a contract. And then we could close that transaction, and I could either send a notary, I could do the transaction remotely, we could e-sign now with technology. And it all depends. Every state's different. So as long as you file you file the right corporate documents, you follow their compliance, you just have to be up on everything essentially. So again, growth is hard, but if you take it one step at a time and you get licensed properly and you follow the procedures, the sky's the limit. You could keep going.
Sure. So it sounds like the firm is really focused on mostly residential, but some commercial real estate transactions. Does the firm also offer other types of legal services to your clients?
So not only do we do real estate, we do residential and commercial. I definitely would, you are right. Residential is definitely more of a trump, but commercial is a very booming business right now too.
Okay.
But we also do estate planning. I knew that the transition is everybody at my real estate closings and whatnot, they always ask, hey, do you do wills or trusts? And oh, I've always been wanting to do that. So like, hello, light bulb, why would I not do estate planning?
Well,
Um,
as every business leader in this podcast audience knows, the easiest place to get new business is where, Bill?
is from your business and from your clientele.
Right, from your existing clients. So adding more services to your existing clients makes all the sense.
Exactly. And so it started with estate planning as a transition, and I started doing more corporate setups on the commercial end because, again, when you're doing commercial, a lot more banks and lenders want title to be held in LLCs or corporations or trusts. And
Sure.
so that was a transition with the estate planning into corporate law now. And I'm doing more corporate work. And we started doing some mergers. We've done acquisitions.
Interesting.
Yep. And then people have accidents, people slip and fall, or
Well,
they've had different, ailments or mistreatments, we'll say. So naturally I had to progress into getting someone on board to do litigation. I need a personal injury attorney. And so now we're working with a firm who does personal injury. And I think that's where I'm going to probably end this expansion on different types of law. But I think with real estate goes estate planning for sure, definitely into corporate, and it never hurts to have some personal injury in the background.
well, that's the best way to get new business, like we discussed, and I'm sure that's going to, provide a runway for existing business for years to come for you, Bill. So let's talk about the future. You say you don't need to be in 50 states, but you're in the surrounding states in Massachusetts and the New England area. What does the next 3 to 5 years look like for Sync Law?
So, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm not satisfied. You think I'm going to stay in these 5 states? Absolutely not, is the answer. Um, the outlook for
I had
me
a
is
feeling.
the outlook for me is to keep it going. But again, I'm going to make sure I get that right connection. I want to eventually work my way to Florida. I know here it's South Carolina from New England, or it's Hilton Head area. It's Florida.
Yeah.
as the generations are changing and people are getting older and their own real estate, they're headed south or they're headed west, but mainly south from here. And so my outlook is to expand eventually into South Carolina, and to Florida would probably be my next few states. But again, it's when that opportunity knocks and that time comes. But for now, I want to be the master. I want to master what I have. I want to master these states, and I want to be the best. I want to be second to none. And, again, that's not tomorrow. That's not next year or in 2 years from now. That's going to be my mentality always. And my outlook is that once I feel mastered enough, I think the next state will come to me. And that's pretty much how I've been, slow and steady, and just be good at what I'm doing, be the best that you're doing.
Interesting. So, in your plans for expansion into different geographic areas, especially down south, what do you think would be getting in your way of of achieving those growth goals? What would be holding you back?
It's sometimes my own fears. It's my fear of not being the best or being successful. But I've been there and done that, to be honest with you, Rob. And you know where that's gotten me? At a firm for 15 years of my past. And I needed to know, and I knew I needed to go. And people told me to go, and I wasn't ready. So now I'm embracing this. I'm embracing this mentality, and I'm changing the way I used to think. And I want to think more optimistically. I want to look towards the future. I want to look past being afraid to make those steps. And embrace is the key word here. Embrace the change. Change is hard, but what's going to hold me back is nothing, Rob. When I'm ready, I'm going to make that move. But want to make sure it's going to be a good move, because I don't want to lose money. I only want to make money, and it's not for myself. It's for my employees. It's for my family. It's for my legacy. But I don't need to be the jack of 50 states, like I said to you. It's mastering what I have now and moving on, and I'll get past those fears.
So it's interesting, Bill. I've known you for a little while now, and although you've run Sinc Law now for over 10 years, you keep going back to that pivotal moment when you had that separation with your former partner or your former firm. And that clearly still drives you. And that was a really impactful, period of your life, I can tell.
It was. And because it was the stepping stone. Not only am I a little mad at myself for not making that move sooner, but I think I'm also fueled by some comments that were made that maybe kept me there longer. To be quite honest with you, Rob, I'm not from Boston and Massachusetts, and it's a harder state to start something from scratch. And I didn't have a family member in law. I don't have an uncle or aunt or anything.
Sure, you didn't have a built-in network.
I had zero, other than from working from somebody else. And I didn't want to ever steal my former employees' clients. And I never went, and I never embraced or went after those. I forged my own road here. And what always fueled my fire was my previous employer saying to me straight up, he said, unfortunately, Bill, I think you might not be successful because you're not from here, and you're not. And truth be told, when I started my own firm and I realized that I'm almost making my same amount of salary in 1 month that I made for the entire year, that always resonated with me. That was the fuel that still bothers me, and it still was a memorial pivotal point for me to just keep this fuel and this fire burning, that I will be better than that. And it doesn't matter whether I'm here or not. If I'm the best at what I do, I will be getting business, and I will get continued business, and people will want to come to me. It doesn't matter if I'm from here or not. As long as I am the best in my business, or at least I strive to be, I know the business will keep coming. I will not be or settle for second to none. And those type of experiences, like you said, I won't forget it. It fuels me. And I spoke to another attorney who worked there, and he's like, yeah, he's similar to me. And that same person has their own firm, and they're very successful these days. So I guess, if someone said that to you, or things are not that way, and you have to just use that as not to keep you down, as a motivator.
Right. Wow, that's incredible. So, in someone who went out on their own and started their own firm, started their own business relatively recently, right? It's within the last 10 or 11 years.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for our audience about, how to stick with it and how to trust your gut and make your business work?
I mean, you have to separate yourself from being like the other people in your business or industry. For me, and to pivot and to change, I knew I had to also come up with what's next. What is the generation, or who am I going to be dealing with in the future? It's not about what I'm going to be closing on or doing now. It's also who will be my clientele in the future. So I'm looking ahead, and I'm, trademarking certain mottos or slogans. I'm building a modern and clean, amazing environment. And I'm positioning myself with different offices in places where business is busier than most other places, but also that is a high network. So you got to find that right niche of whatever you're doing, and know that if it's a client, if it's in business, if it's in money, or if it's in trading, you need to trade the right commodity or the right stock. If it's in law, you need to do the right environment. You need to sell in the right towns or in the right cities, or
Right.
so all I could say is, at that point, you got to make those decisions to just try to be the best you could be in each realm of your career move or where you're at now. Because just setting up another company and just doing something that everybody else is doing is not going to separate you. You're just going to join it. And if you want to be different, and you want to be successful, and you want to eventually own a multi-million-dollar company, then you need to think outside the box and think ahead.
So what I'm hearing from you, Bill, is differentiation and focus.
Correct. And don't give up ever. There's roadblocks, that,
Sure.
people don't always want to hear the success story. They love the bad story. This is why true crime is probably so popular and whatnot these days. It's like,
of course,
yeah,
of
everybody
course.
want to hear, we want to hear the successful story, but so you can't get kicked when you're down. Misery does love company. So fuel that for yourself, even when we're all going through a tough time in life. And, I say, but don't let it keep you down. Always know that there's something better out there. There's an opportunity that's going to knock. Keep a good attitude, keep a good mentality, don't be that angry person, be positive, and it
Right.
helps,
Right.
positivity does come, it's a karma thing.
Bill, this has been just a great conversation. I really appreciate your thoughts on starting your own business, being intentional, being differentiated in your markets, and being focused on what you can do for your clients really, really well. So this is Bill Sincavage. He's the founding attorney and owner of Sinc Law in Massachusetts and surrounding states. Bill, thank you so much for your time today and joining us on the Think Small podcast.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure, and thank you for having me.
Welcome to the Think Small podcast, hypergrowth for small businesses. So, what's slowing you down?